just because you serve my meal and you take my order, I don't think you deserve a tip. And that's the lemon. What's up, everybody? This is Evan with Lemons with Clemens, and the lemon today is, should you tip your waiter? Or your server, your waitress, whatever you want to... For the rest of this podcast, let's call it a server. I think that's an all-inclusive term. Doesn't ruffle too many feathers, because I think I'm going to be ruffling enough feathers with this conversation. So, for a backstory, I've worked in a restaurant for about a decade now. And so I have a very strong opinion on what I think should go on whenever you go to a restaurant, or how I think you should be served, how you should be taken care of. And to be fair, before we get too far in this, I know and I understand in some cases I have absolutely unrealistic expectations. And I'm aware of that, and I'm okay with that. But I do not think it's unrealistic or unfair to have good service. That's also why if I go to a restaurant, a lot of the times, if able to, I will go sit at the bar. The bar usually is going to have your most skilled or knowledgeable employee there who will give you the best service. Most of the time, that's what the bartender is. But first, we have to figure out what exactly is the tip. All right? We going to be looking at the tip as the wage of the person taking care of you? Or are we going to be looking at it as an incentive for the person taking care of you to do better? For the people that are actually working, that is their wage. That is how they make ends meet. And so it's going to be a little more of a touchy subject for those people, because that's how they make ends meet. For me, I think it's an incentive for you to do better, because I don't think I should be required to give you what is now, I think the average of what people think you should do is about 20% of your bill. I do not think that should be a requirement. If I'm going to budget when I go out to eat, I do not think that I should have to budget also 20% of what I think the bill will be just to give a tip. I think you should always have extra cash on you, or an extra amount of money on you, to be fair. Okay, anywhere you go, you should always have cash if anything comes up or anything arises. All right, so we got to talk about a couple things when it comes to this, all right, because I'm being very vague with this, and for a reason, okay? So first, we have to figure out something a little bit about the tip. So whenever you first talk to your server and you get some information, it's important, I think, to figure out a couple things here. Where's that tip going to go? Do they do a tip pool? A lot of restaurants do tip pools where all the people that are working pull their tips together and they all split them at the end of the night. So if I'm tipping you as a server, is it going to everybody or is it just going to you? Because I'm trying to tip based on the service I'm getting. Okay? That's the first bit of information you need. The second bit of information you need, is there a tip out? Meaning, does the server have to give a portion of their tips or the money that they have in their pocket to the host, the busser, the person rolling their silverware, the one person running their food, the bartender? All these things are things that a lot of people do not think about. You have to factor that in. So whenever you're giving a tip, you have to understand that a small bit of that could possibly be going to somebody else as well. Okay, so we have that information. So with that said, once you have that, should you tip your server? And with my unreal expectations, I am very certain that if a server does well, I will leave them a tip. But if a server does poorly, I do not think I should give them a tip. Now, there's one caveat to that situation, which is you cannot determine your tip based on the food. Because the kitchen isn't your server. The kitchen is not who made your food or who is taking care of you. The server is not the one who made your food. So just because your meal came out like shit isn't necessarily the server's fault. So you can't just give a bad tip because the meal was bad. You might have picked something bad. Now, if the server suggested it, I think you might have a little bit of a leeway there. So if the meal came out wrong, or it was bad, or it wasn't warm, or it didn't have its sides, or anything like that. You cannot dictate your tip to the server based on that. Unless, another caveat here, so there's so many layers. We can't be looking at this as a one-dimensional thing. There's so many layers when it comes to any of these subjects. You cannot completely factor the kitchen into it. If the meal comes out wrong sauces, or something wasn't left off that was supposed to be left off, a lot of times it is going to be the server's fault. The most common issue I see with service is the person taking care of a table is too quick to put the blame on somebody else. Meaning, it's the person that dropped it off's fault, it's the person that made the food's fault, it's the kitchen's fault. It is not their fault. And that is one of the things that rubs me the wrong way. I've done this for a long time. I've worked in restaurants a long time, and I've eaten out a lot. And too often, things are blamed on the kitchen when it's not their fault. Now, you can tell if a server is being genuine and they're apologetic, or if it, if the server's been kicking ass and being fantastic the entire time, and has been nothing but perfect, I think you have a little leeway there. Of course, at that point, yes, chances are it was the kitchen. But if the service is average, or things are going well but not going fantastic, maybe they're not on top of it. And again, one of the caveats is you got to factor in how busy they are. You have to be aware of what's going on. If it's messed up, a lot of times you can tell if it was the server's fault or if it's actually the kitchen's fault. But one thing that will not affect the tip is if a server is genuine, apologetic, and takes ownership. There is nothing better to me than somebody taking ownership of a mistake they made. Too often now, people don't take ownership or responsibility of their own mistakes, and it's easier overall for us to say it's somebody else's fault, it wasn't my fault, because you don't want to look bad, because you think your tip is going to be affected by it. For me personally, and how I view it, is that it should not affect your tip if you take responsibility and you try to fix the problem. If my server comes up to me, I absolutely messed that up. I forgot to tell them to leave your pickles off of your sandwich. All right, I hate pickles, so that's one of the things that just irks me. You'll lose your tip in a heartbeat, all right, if you mess that up and then blame somebody else for it. So if I get my food and the server takes ownership and says, I'm so sorry, let me fix that for you, let me get you a new one, that is absolutely my fault. That is not going to change your tip. In fact, that's probably going to give you a bigger tip, because I prefer, and I think most people should prefer, somebody that is genuine and sincere, which is something that is lacking and something that you do not see anymore. So take ownership. If you work in the restaurant industry, try that. Just if you have a couple mistakes, I want you to try that. If you work in the restaurant, just take ownership of it and say, you know what, that's my fault. And see how it affects you. See what happens when you do your normal blaming the kitchen or blaming other people, and then do the other thing where you could sit there and take responsibility for it if it legitimately is your fault. Now, obviously, don't take responsibility if it's not your fault. You have to have a little sincerity. You have to make sure that people understand that you do care and you are trying. Now, of course, everybody has bad days and off days, but that should also affect your tip. Okay? So, what about how you should tip? Okay? So, we're talking a little bit of getting a little information about the tip, okay? But how you should tip is you should tip for the service. Now, if you're getting taken care of, give them money. All right. Obviously, if you have a beautiful woman and you have the younger guys or hell, even the older guys that think they're big shots by leaving a $100 bill, yeah, the woman's gonna love it. She's not gonna call you. She's gonna take a picture of it and put it on Snapchat and tell everybody how awesome it was, and then how much of a creep you were for trying to get you to talk to her later. She doesn't care. She wants your money, bro. That's all it comes down to. But for me personally, if you were not a good server, or if you're an average at best server, maybe it's not the job for you. Maybe it's not. You know, the idea that you were entitled for a tip just because you took a food order and put it in, there's more to it, in my opinion, if I go out. If I'm going out to eat, I want to get taken care of. My table should be clean of all the dirty dishes. My drink should be full almost at all times. Obviously, if they're busy, there's different things that happen, okay? I don't think that just because you took my order, you're automatically entitled to a 20% compensation of my bill. I have no problems with it. In fact, I tip very handsomely in some aspects. I think 20% isn't enough if it's good service. 20% I think it should be if it's okay service. All right? But I don't think that if you're a bad server, you should get a tip. And you shouldn't get mad if you don't get a tip. Chances are you're a bad server. Now, of course, there's always going to be the asshole douchebags that don't leave a tip and just go out to eat, rack up a big bill, and leave the server nothing. You know what? There's a special place in hell for them. Because that's bullshit too. So I'm 100% on your side, servers, okay? You should not get screwed over like that. But at no point should you be entitled to money just because you took an order. Chances are you mixed up my order anyway. On average, I should say. And that's why the good servers should get taken care of more so than bad servers. The bad servers are going to stay in the business just because they're making money. Because as a whole, as an industry, I know you make shit for minimum wage. Most places you're making actually half of what minimum wage should be. But after you count your tips at the end of the day, you're making more than, hell, most servers are making more than the managers. The bartenders are. They're making more than the cooks that made the food that have been slaving away in the 120-degree kitchen. Making more than a dishwasher that's soaked. You're making more than the old lady in the crack of dawn in the morning portioning your food out. All right, so don't tell me that you don't make good money as a server, because I know you do. The problem most of the time is that a server does not know how to budget because they are making cash money and they don't put it away. Most of them are running around with it in their pocket, and then of course you have the good ones that can budget and put it in the bank and take care of it, which is fantastic. But I promise you, the people that put that money away and act like they don't have it, and then if you put it away and then pull it out after a 2-week period like the rest of the people that are making hourly, I promise you, you're going to be making more money than everybody. Guaranteed. Especially when it comes down to a holiday. Especially if you're dealing with a bunch of drinking people. They'll just throw money if you take care of them. Okay? So you shouldn't be entitled to a tip just because you took an order is what I'm getting at. But I am very into the idea that it's a survival of the fittest when it comes to service. If you're not a good server, you don't make good money, and so you find another job. Sometimes serving isn't your calling. Sometimes bartending isn't your calling. Hell, any job that anybody does might not be their calling. Hell, me talking right now might not be my calling. But I'm also not asking you for money afterwards. But you can if you want to. If you want to give me a donation, of course, there's going to be links available for you for donations. But the more listens and making sure that you follow me on Spotify or on Facebook will help tremendously. Make sure you show your friends if you're enjoying what you're listening to. But that's a sidebar. So we got to decide what good service and bad service is, I think, because I think it's incredibly important to understand that I'm not just sitting here trying to say you shouldn't get a tip without having a certain expectation. So first, the order. You should ask me questions. You should know more about what's going on in the restaurant than I do. If I ask you a question, you should know what it is. Or, and I hate when new people say, sorry, I'm new, I don't know that. Screw that. You know what? I don't know that. Let me find that out for you. You want to help the guest. That's what I want. I just want to get taken care of. I don't expect you to be perfect, but I want you to really try. I really want you to try your best. That's all I really want. I want some effort. So 1, you should be more knowledgeable. 2, my drinks. I shouldn't be waiting forever for my first drink. Everybody knows this. This is the number one thing in every restaurant. You do not wait for a drink. Okay? Give me my first drink. And you know what? Don't let my drink get empty. Give me another one. Obviously, if it's something that you have to charge me for, ask me if I want it. Don't just rack up my bill. Don't be an asshole. If I ask you what's good on the menu, do not tell me the most expensive item because I see through that. Be genuine. That's all I want. I want perfection, all right? All right? So I want somebody to be sincere and genuine, and I want to actually enjoy my visit. Even if you don't have a good personality, I'm okay with that. There's something like if I go get my hair cut, Sometimes you get the people that cut your hair that will talk your ear off and are enjoyable to talk to. And sometimes you get the person with no personality, and then you worry the entire time because it's just awkward as you sit there as they're buzzing away at your head. At least for a guy, I don't know. For some women, they probably don't have that problem. But anyway, they still, if they do a good job, they're still going to get a tip afterwards because at the end of the day, they did their job, and that's what I'm paying them for. I think, though, not fair to assume that you get a tip just because you took my order. So, if the food's taking a long time, let me know. Keep me updated. If you messed up, tell me. I promise you I'm absolutely fair when it comes to those things. If it's time to leave, give me the bill. Don't forget about me. I don't want a dessert. Just give me the bill. No, I don't want the box. Just give me the bill. No, I'm okay on the nope, I'll just take the bill. Let's go. Bad service obviously would be not having any of that or having only parts of that. Great, my food came out right, but I had an empty drink and I was thirsty the entire time. Or I sat and had to maneuver around dishes. There's nothing worse than if you put dishes on the edge, stacked up neatly, and they leave it there. Or if they take the check and leave the dishes there as well. No, take the damn dishes, please. If I wanted to sit around dishes, I'd eat at home. Because I'm not going to wash them yet. That's why I came here, all right? When I have that good service, I have to factor in the tips. So I ask the questions. How do you do it? Do you all tip each other? And I'll ask that especially if they're doing well. Do you guys do a tip pool? Because at that point, I'll just tell them to put this money in their pocket. Or do you tip out? If they're tipping out, you want to give them a little more. So you have to be fair. Now, here's the other thing that I haven't talked about yet. Actually, I'm kind of go on a little bit of a tangent every now and then, and I get lost in my own train of thought. But there's another, I guess, another argument you could say for over in Europe. Everybody talks about how there's service with no tip, and in fact, a tip is seen as disrespectful, is what I've heard. I don't know if that's true. So leave a comment on Facebook, or once I start getting these on YouTube. Leave a comment there so I can get the actual information. But from what I understand, it's almost an insult to tip the person taking care of you because they already make minimum wage. Or more than minimum wage, depending, I'm guessing. So if it is good service and you're making minimum wage or more, then there's not an issue. But does that take away from the service you get if you're making a set standard? If you make a set standard of what pay should be, does the service go down? Does it go up? And that's one thing I don't know. I haven't eaten abroad enough to know. And when I was abroad, I wasn't old enough to really recognize these things. So I'm sure that there's a standard at that point, because I think at that point people care a little bit more about the service. One thing about the restaurant industry, if you start to notice, especially in big corporate places, a lot gets lost in the mix. So a lot of very bad servers will be around because nobody recognizes it, or they're short-staffed, and so they have to keep them on just to get through the day or the night, or nobody cares. And so, again, that's why I kind of go back to the survival of the fittest mentality when it comes to a tip. If you're not good, someone needs to let you know and you need to get out. If it's real bad, I'm going to ask for a manager and let them know. But most of the time, they don't care. I've been in this industry long enough, and I've seen enough that a lot of people just don't care. So if you're getting paid a certain wage, do you care a little bit more then? Because on average, a server is going to be making more than minimum wage, unless maybe you can only work a couple hours in the morning. But on average, per hour that you're working, even when you tip out, if you're working a 3-hour lunch shift from 11 to 2, you made $40. Oh shit, I only made $40. Oh no. What is that? What's 40 divided by 3? Well, let's break it down. If it was 30, it would be $10 an hour. So we now know at least $13 an hour for 3 hours. What are your cooks making? Are they making more? I think you have a right to say something. You're working hard too. It's a different type of work, is the one thing people have to recognize and understand. Just because you're waiting tables and serving and doing all these other things doesn't mean it's not hard work. It's a different type of work. I don't really like the idea of a minimum wage or a standard pay for service, because I think the tip is an incentive to do better. I think it would bring better service all around unless you brought in good management to make sure the training is done correctly and you have a standard across the restaurant for how people should get taken care of. I think maybe we just need to change the culture of restaurants, but I think right now the incentive of getting a good tip should be good enough to do better. But the problem is there is such an idea that there is a standard 20% tip that people think that you have to leave that no matter what, that even the bad servers will get it, so then they're making more than what they would. So maybe you do want the standard wage at that point, so that you get the people that are actually good at it and want to be a server, because some people just like talking to people and taking care of people. Sometimes it's the right fit for people. Sometimes it's not. But I think the idea that you should be entitled to a tip is horrendous. I think you're absolutely wrong, and you will never convince me otherwise. Now, I understand we all have bills to pay and we have ends to meet. If it doesn't pay your bills, maybe it's not for you. Maybe you're in the wrong place. Maybe you need a different job. Maybe you need a second job. Maybe you need some help. Maybe at that point you get government assistance. If you're trying your hardest and you're a damn good server and you still can't pay the bills, then there's something that's not right, and it's not about what's being left for you by the guests most of the time. And I could be wrong, but I've worked in small town restaurants, city restaurants, smaller city restaurants. I mean, it really comes down to how the person making the money budgets it at the end of the day. And I think that's going to be true with any job that you do, which is why the idea of minimum wage and all that kind of blows my mind right now, which is a whole another thing. And I might end up making a whole nother podcast about that. So, since this is kind of my first episode, let's break it down let's kind of come to a conclusion here. So, I don't think a tip should be a standard. I don't think it's that you're entitled to a tip. I do think that you should tip if the service is good. I do not think you should tip based on the food quality. You are tipping an individual. Now, I did have a friend actually mention, and I said I was going to bring this up, so I better bring this up before the end of this, all right, is that there's a good argument also that somebody working for a company should not be paid their wages by somebody else. They should be paid by that company, which is another argument, again, for the standard pay. And I think that's a very interesting argument, and I think you can get a lot further with that than anything else. And again, that goes back to, at that point, I think you care as a manager and the training of your staff a lot more at that point, because you're the one taking care of them. I think the culture is built around, well, the server will take care of it themselves because they are making the money from that table. Anyway, so back to the conclusion. Factor in the price of the tip out or the tip pool, how the server did, and make sure you're aware of the surroundings. Don't tip based on the service. If you're going on a Friday, Saturday night, and you get decent service, if you get decent service and they're getting their ass kicked, then hell yeah, throw them a tip. That means if it's slower, you go at the early part of the night or at the end of the night, guarantee you get kick-ass service. But don't go in the middle of a dinner rush and then bitch that you couldn't get them to stand at your table for too long. But I don't think you are asking for too much to have somebody that's knowledgeable what they're talking about, what they want to do, or what they're talking about and what's going on at the restaurant, I guess I should say. So be genuine, take care of the people, admit when you're wrong, when you make a mistake, and try to make it a pleasant experience. Smile. Laugh at my shitty jokes. That will get you a bigger tip, I promise, because I have bad jokes, and I just want acknowledgement of them. Otherwise, I don't think you should get tipped just because you took my order. And that's the limit.